Hey everyone, this is Rocky, and welcome to the first part in this series on how to write a paragraph. In this part, I'll give an overview of what paragraphs are and what they do. So there are two basic functions of paragraphs. One is that they group the information in a more manageable way so that the reader has an easier time following the ideas. And similarly, they organize the ideas into themes or topics so that it's easier to follow the logical progression of your argument or your document. Just visually, if you were to open up a document and it looked like this with a huge block of text, you'd probably put it down. And that's because it's a lot of effort for us as readers to try to decipher where the information should be grouped instead of the author doing their job and making that easier for us. Just by adding in some indents here, it's much easier to see where the ideas are grouped and to process the ideas and to make our way through the document. Of course, in business writing, sometimes there are block paragraph formats where the first line isn't indented, but there's a line space between paragraphs. That's also acceptable. So there are two main types of paragraphs, at least for our purposes. There are a lot more if you were to say that there were two types of paragraphs to a literary scholar. They'd probably argue with you for a couple hours and describe 7 or 8 different specific types of nuances in paragraphs, but that's not really practical for our purposes. There's just two main types of things that we'll be doing. We're either going to be telling the reader something that is describing something, or we're going to be arguing something. So some examples of tell paragraphs. These aren't official terms, they're just my terms for the purposes of example. We might describe a person, a place, a thing. Even you could describe a term or an idea. For example, if you're writing a recommendation to a client who didn't have so much finance knowledge, you might have to spend a paragraph describing what return on invested capital is, or whatever the term is that's most applicable to what you're recommending, and give them the context to understand that. But that paragraph would be a descriptive paragraph. Also, sometimes you'll narrate a story. This happens when you're giving a biographical account of a person. Sometimes there's a chronology of events attached to these types of paragraphs. You might have to give instructions. So let's just say you were explaining to a client how to open an account with the firm. Then you would say you follow these steps, and your paragraph would be just describing step 1, step 2, step 3. And of course, most documents have an introductory paragraph that explains or tells the reader what's going to happen in the document, and a concluding paragraph that restates that in some unique, meaningful way, but it's still basically describing. For claim paragraphs, we're making an assertion or sort of a mini argument. A lot of times we'll have a main argument for the overall document. This is our thesis. And then we'll have several supporting reasons. Those are like mini arguments. We'll look at some examples in a bit, but it should be pretty self-explanatory what an argument is. This is sort of a subset of the previous idea about a mini argument, but a lot of times if we contrast two things or make a comparison, we're arguing that something's similar or different, or we're arguing that X causes Y. This usually falls into the claim section, although it could sort of be a tell paragraph if we're just describing a relationship that's understood to exist and agreed upon by most people, and we're not really arguing that it exists, we're just explaining it or describing it. So this last one could fall in either one, but for the most part it'll be a claim. Let's take a look at a couple of examples just so we can see what we're talking about here. So a few examples of tell paragraphs. This is just describing a place. So Wall Street is a busy place is the topic sentence, and then the paragraph should go on to provide some details to give some more context for that. This one's just a story, so this is about how Gorman rose to the position of CEO at Morgan Stanley. That will just chronicle his rise. Some instructions, like I said before, again, it's just another type of descriptive paragraph. So the following steps explain how to account for forward contracts. The first step is blah, blah, blah. A couple of examples of claim paragraphs. So one reason that Abenomics has failed is that Japan's inflation rate has worsened. So it looks like we have two claims here, but really this first part of the sentence refers back to the main thesis, the person's overall argument. And the second half of the sentence is the claim here about inflation rate. So the paragraph should go on to provide some evidence to support that specific claim about an inflation rate. And in doing so, the writer will support the overall argument. Another example of a claim paragraph, this one's just a cause and effect one. So a third cause of the subprime mortgage crisis was the fall in asset prices. So similar to the last example, the writer refers to the overall argument about probably their document asserts to be able to explain the reasons for the crisis. And this particular paragraph makes a claim about fallen asset prices being one of the reasons. So this paragraph should give evidence about the fallen asset prices. Okay, so now that we've looked at some examples, just some practical questions about length and structure. So how long should your paragraphs be? Well, probably for your purposes in business writing, they'll be about 4 to 6 sentences long. Sometimes they could be a little bit longer. But you don't want to have paragraphs that are just 1 or 2 sentences long. You will notice that that happens in some specific areas like journalism. So newspaper articles often have 1-sentence paragraphs, and it's not acceptable on most other disciplines. For business writing, where you're often making arguments and recommendations, writing reports, you have to convince your readers of something or give them confidence in something. So if you have a 1-sentence paragraph, you basically just have a topic sentence with no supporting evidence. So you don't want to have a string of unsupported ideas in your document. You won't convince anybody of anything. So you'll need to have at least a few more sentences in your paragraph to provide the evidence. Also, another rough guideline that isn't so much about the amount of content in terms of sentences, but the amount of content that fills up the page. If you notice that your paragraph's getting above 3/4 of a page, it's probably going to be too intimidating to go through. Chances are that you could break that paragraph up into different ideas. You probably are mixing topics in your paragraph if you get too far along. So although this isn't an exact guideline, once you start to see that your paragraph is almost filling up the page, you should stop and see if you can break it up, because you might not be organizing your ideas so well for the reader. So in terms of structure, all paragraphs should have a topic sentence. This just explains what the reader should expect in the paragraph, and it makes it easier to process the ideas. Then you'll provide your details, data, and specifics. Those are the body sentences, and they should all relate back to that topic sentence. And not all paragraphs, but some of your paragraphs it will make sense to have a concluding sentence or a transition sentence to help the reader remember the links back to the topic or show how this paragraph relates to the next paragraph. We'll look at some examples of all this in the next couple videos, but I just wanted to give a quick overview of them now. So that's it for the first video, and I'll see you in the next one.